I know those folks. It's been a while. Hang on, I forgot to full screen you because that's not in the list of things I'm supposed to do. Let me click on this and hit that button, which they hid. There we go. And then if I click that, I think that will go away. Hello, folks. How are you?
Wow.
Hello.
I almost did the graphic for this.
For breakfast?
Don't we all?
Yeah. Okay.
How come my thing is moving me?
I don't know. That's probably.
Who does that?
I'm assuming it's a Teams thing, or it's not your camera, right? Because you're using this new.
It's
setup.
your side of the Teams, not mine.
It's not, because look, mine doesn't
move.
move.
Not doing it to John. Although
it's
John
a camera
maybe doesn't
setting.
recognize John's face as a face.
It is moving on my side.
I think it's moving on
you
your
have
setting.
a different version of Teams than I do.
Interesting. Okay.
Oh,
we have someone else showing up.
Are you here, Jamie? If you got to be here, you got to say hello and turn your camera on.
Hello.
That's half of it.
I'm just lurking.
Oh, you can't lurk because it puts a big
icon.
gray square where you are on the screen now that says JS.
Oh no. My picture doesn't show up?
No. That's unfortunate. This is Jamie, everyone, but we can't see her.
Sorry, Jamie does Xamarin, and she was going to hang out and lurk, but lurking puts you in the middle of the screen as a gray square. So you're welcome to join us, but you can't just be a gray square.
That's fine. I'll take care of it.
Awesome.
Okay.
Now that we decided we would try and get the original crew back together, it's been a while since it was just the three of us talking crap. And giving people updates on what's going on. And
by talking crap, that is you being mean to us.
Oh, it's me who's mean to you? Is that what it is now? We'll take a poll. Do we have a way of
oh, there should be a poll. It should be powered by Signal R.
What's
a poll about meanness?
About meanness. If
it's
anything,
like a slider bar.
We need like that worm that gets overlaid about who's being more mean, like in the debates.
I think that it's pretty clear.
It's pretty clear. Dearie me.
Oh, hey, can we talk about how I put hours and hours and hours of work into blog posts and no one comments and I think I'm talking into the abyss, but then I slap the keyboard for 5 minutes about Encarta and suddenly it's on the internet?
I thought you were there the whole day, my friend. Number one on Hacker News for the entire day.
And they're so mean.
Were they mean?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I read it wasn't too bad.
I don't know. This is just pure nostalgia. I don't know why anybody cares about this. That's stupid.
Might I suggest that you might be reading into... You're reading a little bit... You're seeing what you perhaps are inclined to see rather than what I saw. Because I saw the exact same comment about this is just nostalgia. But then the guy admitted that he found it fulfilling, even though it was just nostalgia.
Well, or it was just nostalgia and he was 20 and isn't old enough to have nostalgia requires a certain number of years.
That is very true. But I did enjoy it. I loved Encarta. I miss Encarta also.
Yes. And then the really interesting comments were the ones where people were talking about which version of Encarta was the best.
Oh, see, that's interesting.
Because the old heads were like, oh yeah, 2005, that was a good year for Encarta.
I have to admit, I think I only really
fine
absorbed
wine.
the first one. Like the first one was so impactful.
Someone else was like, oh yeah, it's 2004. That's when they removed the index and timely. It was just it was.
What did you expect? That's why it went viral, man. That's why.
Oh, and then other like side conversations happened on Twitter about what about Money 95? Microsoft Money 95. That was the greatest piece of software ever.
Legitimately, Money was the best personal finance software of all time. And I kept my Money file around for like 10 years after it stopped. They stopped.
My wife still uses it.
What's that?
My wife still uses it.
Oh my gosh, it is
just
such a good piece
checkbook.
of software. It was, and I used it. Bear in mind, I used it in Australia where it had none of the automatic bank connection features that y'all in the US got to enjoy. I had to manually type everything in, and it was still so much better than Quicken, Personal Finance, or whatever else I compared it to.
Little newsflash.
Yeah.
If you go out there and Google with the Bing for Microsoft Money 95 Sunset Edition,
you can still get it.
You can download it.
What? Still available.
Yep. It's called Sunset Deluxe Money Plus Sunset Deluxe.
Where do download Money plus Sunset Deluxe?
Yep.
Oh my goodness.
It's 30 megabytes. So the real conversation that we need to have
is
here,
why
Damien,
our apps, yes.
Why is Microsoft Money 30 megs and .NET CLI is like 6 gigs?
I want to download it just to see how fast it is. So we can all complain about how slow software is today on our modern software.
No, it's bad.
Modern OSs. That was such a good... See, now you've got... This is what I'm really reminiscing about. Money was brilliant. That was such a good app.
It was really good.
Really
I can still feel the little kind of stutter pause when you hit tab and move to the next line when you're like entering your details.
Because it was calculating. Like you could feel it. Like
you could feel it like
working hard.
You could feel it move registers.
It's so good.
It's like move AX, 0. Yeah. Yes.
I love it that when we get on the show, this is what the show. We haven't talked anything about anything that matters to this show. We're just doing our usual tech stuff. Is there any other tech stuff going on this week? Like, is there anything new? Anyone got a new laptop or anything else?
I have, well, I don't know, a bajillion solar panels. There's like a billion people running around my house.
Are you getting solar installed?
I'm getting solar, and while I'm at it, I'm getting AC.
It must be bonus time.
Yeah.
No, actually, they're just rolling it into our monthly.
Oh, nice.
payment.
He's like, solar.
Do you,
it's actually saving us. So basically, it goes into like a monthly payment, and it's saving us money every month because our AC and stuff.
Are you willing to disclose which vendor or how it works, or like?
It's a small local one.
Okay.
It's it's Sollink. But we get people all the time coming. I think we're the only people in our neighborhood that don't have solar at this point. Okay. Southern California.
Yeah.
And these were the first ones that did it as a ground mount because we have like some ground.
I see.
Yeah. So.
Okay. Yeah, because I noticed Tesla relaunched their solar business yesterday. Tesla Solar relaunched.
Yeah, they've got
a new financing plan. Where you basically just rent the panels from Tesla. They'll install them for free on your house. You rent them for a monthly fee. It's only available in certain states. And just like a lot of the other subsidized programs, you give all the government subsidies to Tesla. So that's how they make the money out of it. And then that's it. You just pay your monthly fee. And then if you want, you only want your big fee you'll pay is when you want them removed, you pay like $1,500 or something.
So there's that one model, and then there's others where you just buy it. And with this one, it's basically like we're buying it, but our monthly payment, we just think of it as our electric bill.
Yeah.
And comes down for most months of the year.
Yeah, so. I'd love to do it. I just don't think the where I live is probably really conducive. I'd love to do it more for the environmental aspect of it. But I did offset. I made the change to offset all my power, so we can do green offset power here with our power company. And so you can pay extra every month, and they'll 100% offset your power with green power from renewable sources, and then you can pay extra for solar power on top of that. So you don't have to have solar in your house. You can just buy solar power directly from the grid.
If you PayPal me once a month, I'll send you some.
You can send me some solar power.
We can do it power over Ethernet.
Nikola Tesla style. You just like wirelessly over the ionosphere or something, bounce it off the atmosphere or something. That sounds great.
The other thing I'm excited about is I'm getting an actual AC thing set up in my office, a mini split thing.
Yeah, nice.
What does that mean?
A split system air conditioner that sits on the wall and keeps him cold.
Yeah.
And then a heat.
Is that a good thing?
Yeah,
it is.
He's hot. I think there it is.
Why don't you just have AC?
See that thing up on the wall?
Some houses aren't conducive to putting central AC in.
So you don't have to run ducting into
exactly.
Oh, yeah.
And they're efficient. If you don't need to do the whole house, this is a much more efficient way of just heating a particular space.
So the way it works is like normal AC is ducting, it's blowing a bunch of air, like, hundreds or thousands of feet per minute, blah, 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 cubic feet around. This is ducting the refrigerant into the room, and then it just has a blower. So then I have to run a pipe instead of a big duct of air. So, yeah.
I'm trying to install Money.
Oh, you try to install Money.
I'm installing it in Windows Sandbox. Do you ever use Windows Sandbox?
No, I haven't. Do I have to turn that on?
Yeah, so Windows Sandbox, you just go into the Windows features and you turn it on. And it's not like a VM. It's a VM based on your existing base operating system. It just boots up.
It does just enough isolation.
It's failing to install because of some base operating system schmutz that's missing. It looks like it wants MSVCRT something that I've never seen before.
That's the Visual C++ runtime. So we know where Scott's day is gone now.
Well, yeah, I must know.
I must know, and I must make this work.
But
every
also,
time I've played with Sandbox, there's always like something, like it doesn't persist anything, right?
That's the whole point.
That's the whole
it's
point,
for
yeah.
doing exactly what I'm doing.
It's for trying it out and then going, if you do like it, you can install it on your real thing, right?
It's actually a GAC thing. It says error installed. It's during installation of assembly. C blah 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 C runtime public token. It's trying to throw something in the GAC. What is the C runtime doing in the GAC?
Maybe it's an interrupt
shim, a native
interrupt shim that is trying to put in the GAC, and maybe
so
it's relying, the old installer is relying on some old GAC util that it assumes to be installed from .NET 1 or something.
Yeah.
Hang on, Money 95, .NET didn't even exist. So like, I don't know. Maybe...
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it doesn't really, does it? Dear. Hey, by the way, the anniversary of this show is coming up. I have it in my calendar.
How old are
now.
we?
Let me have a look. It's actually going to be on Labor Day, so we'll all be off. But on September 2nd is actually the anniversary of this show. Does my calendar entry say when it started? I think it might be 6 years. Oh, it would have been wise if I'd actually, put the start date in the anniversary so that I could figure that out without having to go to the YouTube history. I think it's 6 years this year. 2013? Maybe it's 5 years this year.
13?
Maybe it's 5. 5 is like a round semi-decimal number. We should do a thing. I'll have to go. I'll take that offline. I'll go and figure out if we're 5 years or 6 years or whatever. Or someone in the chat can figure it out. Someone says they thought it was 5. Maybe it is 5. I'll have to get cake.
It's 5 years, I think.
Wow.
I'm filing a bug on Windows Sandbox.
Okay. Love
it. Money Plus does not install in Sandbox.
John?
Yes.
Do you have some community love to share with the folks?
I do. Unfortunately, I didn't prepare well. These are ASP.NET links, and they're not about Encarta or money. Okay. I'm doing the sharing.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So Steve Gordon pointing out that the gRPC client works with the standard client factory model. So I think this is something that most of the samples will show, instantiating a client, instantiating a server. And this is nice that you can register a gRPC client and then do the same sorts of things where you could set, other policies or whatever kind of stuff.
That's right.
So yeah, nice pointer there. Okay, this is pretty neat. So Glenn posted about running .NET Core with systemd. So systemd is a daemon system similar to Windows services for Linux and or for Unix. And so Tom Dyson from Red Hat.
Tom from Red Hat. That's what we call him.
That's smart. He does a lot of cool stuff. So he's this is an example here. This is contribution that enables running .NET Core stuff on top of systemd.
So, yeah, it's pretty cool. We he contributed this, and people are already running .NET Core stuff in systemd, but this is kind of that little extra mile sugar that makes it more first class. So it integrates with the application lifecycle management features of systemd a little better, so that it knows exactly when the app is starting up and shutting down, and it formats the logging so that the output integrates with the systemd log stuff.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good.
Yep. Good stuff. He's also done some stuff. There's an extension for the a web host builder that enables it's better transport on. I'm forgetting the exact thing, but on Unix it's faster transport and stuff.
Oh, so he so Tom also built and contributed the Linux transport for Kestrel. There's a native Linux transport that he wrote, which is faster than the default transport. Which uses the .NET sockets layer, and we talked about this in Tech and Power last week. And yeah, so I didn't realize this post talked about that. It doesn't. You're just pointing it out. Okay, fair enough.
I'm just pointing out that Tom's a cool guy.
Yes, Tom is a cool.
All right, on to the next thing. Okay, so I've got, this is interesting, 2 chats with SignalR and different views on them. So Jesh has written here about, he's created an ASP.NET app. He's using the Angular CLI to add Angular 8 to it, Angular CLI 8, excuse me, and then adding in So this is a very front end approach, and then it's just got a message hub on the back end. So this is your standard message hub. And then he's doing the focus of this really is kind of wiring up the Angular system and calling back into it. So pretty straightforward. Here's the walkthrough of the code, standard Angular front end component, and there's your chat. So that's nice. Here's another one. And just kind of by chance, these were two that came out this week that I thought were both interesting. This is a chat with SignalR using RabbitMQ. So this is actually a long-running. You'll see this is part 6 of a long series, and this series goes back like there's every maybe 3 or 4 months an addition to this series. So this one going through, there's a lot here that they're building out, and this is a kind of a whole store with a payment and products and policies and all that. And then I'm going to kind of skip down towards the end. There's a whole wiring up the RabbitMQ. There's a wiring up the SignalR. And kind of the magic is down here towards the end where we're actually doing pub sub. And the RabbitMQ is publishing to the SignalR hub. So here there's this, we're handling, this is a notification handler for the RabbitMQ. And then when things like orders and things come in, the pub sub is actually sending that out through the hub. So just kind of a neat, way to wire this all up. And this is part of a larger project to build out this microservices infrastructure thing. So this is nice. And then it makes me want to go back through and look at, previous posts in the series as well. All right, Sean Wildermuth. See, look, he winks at you if you watch long enough. And Sean is doing his first look at ASP.NET Core 3. So he's, Sean's been working on doing these posts on upgrading from different versions over time. And so this is, interesting to see the things he works through. So, some of the standard things, updating the libraries and stuff. He also talks about some of the things that he needed to hook up that have changed over time. Things like routing and making sure endpoint routing and stuff works. So he also points this out here was this installing the global tool for .NET EF.
As it's not included in the SDK anymore.
Yeah. No. Okay, so Derek writing about .NET Core background services. So we've done a few shows on generic hosts. This is just kind of a nice walkthrough of what generic host is, how to set it up, pointing out the .NET Core 3 worker service template, how to configure and run it. And then he's got a sample in here towards the end where he hooks it up, polling for changes. So he runs a background service with exchange rates. So here he's polling for exchange rates. So he's got a worker that is polling against an exchange rate API service here, and just doing updates. For he's just doing logging, but this could, of course, be doing other things. Could be making a call or making information available for another application. So, and then finally wiring it up to a Windows service. All right, role-based security. So Manesh, it's kind of a long post here talking about everything. So first of all, he goes through and explains, just kind of how to set up identity and getting that going in an application. This is this is ASP.NET Core 2.2 MVC. So first of all, he shows wiring up individual user accounts, and he talks about how you can, first of all, of course, you need to go through and apply migrations and stuff. Then once that's set up, he shows that you can scaffold identity. So it shows, adding in all the views and stuff. But in addition to this, he wants to add in a view to manage roles. And so he goes through and shows, he creates a controller and views for this. And yeah, and so then the end result is, here we're able to create roles and list roles. And, this would allow then adding users to roles as well. So, registering and then, adding. Yeah. And so this is kind of high level. There's not, but then this does allow you, once these users are created, then you can apply policies to these. And policies are really pretty powerful. This is a really cool thing where you can say, in this role, I'm allowed to do this or that. So really kind of centralizes and simplifies your application logic. So anyways, very cool. So then here, as part of this, once the user is logged in, then you're able to, deny. And probably I would at this point not just deny, I would show them something, talk to your supervisor or something. But there you go. All right, Gunner's showing a health check here with system memory in ASP.NET Core. So he'd previously written a post on using cross-platform, actually calling down into utilities that'll get you system memory. And so he's now wiring that up into a health check. So this is, he supports for Unix and for Windows. And then, he calls down in. Now, actually, in order to do this health check is running WMIC, or for Unix, it's running free. And for both of those, then it actually has to parse out the data. So it goes through and parses it. That's something for, something, if I was putting that in actual page logic or something, I would feel frightened of doing that. But for health check, I think kind of a different sort of thing here. You just need that data to be available, and then you can make your application, you can respond based on, if there's memory pressure. So anyways, that's kind of the general idea here. All right, here's one last kind of interesting one that I saw. This was on Hacker News too. This is from Demis Bella, and this is SharpScript. So this is an interesting approach. This is an embeddable scripting language for .NET Core and .NET apps. And he's got a syntax that's kind of more similar to like a Vue style. So it's very kind of REPL. Here he shows some things where, doing some and there's a lot of animated GIFs in this page and videos that he links to as well. So there are things like, going through in real time and exploring things. So it's a very kind of like you're piping things to, back and forth to each other. So you can do some live querying. And then one other kind of interesting thing here is he's actually got this available to do like GIST desktop apps. So this is pointing at, at markup in a GIST, and it's able to render something. So it almost in a way reminds me of like dynamic data. So, pretty interesting. And there was discussion on Hacker News about this of like, is this going to be insecure or whatever? And he does point out that you're able to lock it to a specific version. So basically you run a command and it'll download the gist and stuff and run it locally. And then you can lock it to that version, or you can say always pull latest or whatever. So there's a lot of other stuff in here, including that it can you can include it in ASP.NET like Core MVC. You can do a lot of stuff. So it integrates and generally plays nicely.
What do you think about stuff like this, Damien? Like, because there's been lots of scripting over the years, and there's script CS and CSX files, and there's SharpScript, but this is extremely cool and polished and clean. Where do you see things like this, and how do we support them other than telling people about them?
It's a lot of questions.
I'm just curious what you think.
My understanding of this one in particular.
This is a good place maybe for me to stop sharing my screen, because
that was my best idea.
I only found out about this one this morning.
I saw this and was actually working on a blog post about it, and I think it's super, super cool.
Yeah, I saw it this morning. My very quick takeaway, I was reading about it before, it seems to be extracted from the templating facility that's in ServerStack, which is pretty cool. Demis does great stuff. ServerStack has been a framework in the .NET space, it's around for a long time. We've talked about it before. We love that there are other frameworks. So yeah, it's a super interesting idea. As you said, there's been lots of different scripting approaches in .NET before that have been, sort of attempted or have taken hold for a certain type of niche. I think we've heard of a lot of them. I don't think a lot of them have become, or even any of them have become super sort of ingrained or embedded in the wider ecosystem. They tend to come and go, and like I remember
the scripting
style, like facilitating a C#-ish, .NET-ish programming and merging that with scripting. It started. You could argue that to an extent, PowerShell was kind of the first really mainstream one, although it obviously exists for a very different reason, and is a completely different language. but built on .NET. But then we had script.cs, and we had, like you said, the Roslyn's, the stuff that's built into Roslyn, the CSX file support, which a few folks have tried to turn into quote unquote real frameworks. We even had played around with it in the early days of DNX. And I remember an MVP summit years ago, I think Fowler had a prototype he showed that used CSX. In fact, before we did Razor Pages, we were playing around with the idea of using CSX as a scripting base for those type of things. And a lot of it plays into the sort of back and forth between scripting as a programming foundation versus compiled languages. And we see that play out all the time. I don't think anyone has won. They're just different things, and some people prefer one over the other. Some people prefer one for one type of thing and the other for other types of things. This reminded me a lot of some of the use cases of this looked a lot like LinkPad, which I think a lot of us have used in the past, where you've got like a very opinionated set of default providers for data, and then a very easy way to just write queries and manipulate. It's almost like a data REPL using C# as the source. ServerStack has that capability because ServerStack is a very opinionated framework that includes Redis and includes SQL drivers and includes other data, but RabbitMQ, or I don't think it might be a different one. They include a bunch of things. You don't really get to decide. They're just part of ServerStack, and it's
a stack.
It's a stack, and their API has first-class ways to get to those. Whereas, if you think back all the way to ASP, there were 4 or 5 primitive objects, native objects that you would use to do everything, and the whole thing was foundational around that. ServerStack has that plus like 20, 30 others, and I don't know what I'm talking about, right? So that's fine. But the general idea is that it has Redis, and so like the context, the base API has a Redis property. It is very opinionated, which is very liberating in some ways. You don't have to think about it. It's just I invested in this, and that's what I'm going to use. It reminds me a little bit of Cold Fusion, like back in the day. Like you would install the Cold Fusion server, and the Cold Fusion was a language and a component model and a server, and you could configure the Cold Fusion server with things like predefined queries. And so the Cold Fusion server admin would say, I want there to be a query called Damien's Great Product Query, and it talks to this SQL server, and here's the statement, and it takes these parameters. And then your Cold Fusion page, you could literally get the query by name and then pass its parameters in. And I didn't have to know what database it was talking to, how the data got in there. All I had to know is it basically looked like a method that took query parameters and gave me a result. But it was a query. And so it kind of reminds me, like ServerStack conceptually reminds me of that. Obviously, it's not that, but it reminds me a little bit. And so this idea of there's a scripting language built on the opinions of ServerStack, so I can just open up an SS file, say, I want to connect to some data. I know I have Redis. I know I have a SQL driver. I know I have an AWS driver. I can just like type one line to turn those things on and then say, here's my query. Yeah, makes total sense. That's really cool. And the fact that it's been factored enough that you can embed it in other things, that's really cool as well. And like, Unity does a similar thing with C#, right? Like it embeds a runtime, a .NET runtime, so that you can write and script your Unity apps using C#.
Right.
So yeah.
One of the things that I like about Demis's stuff and ServerStack in general, and about this as well, is that it is unapologetically opinionated. You'll recall when Ruby on Rails came out, there was it was saying, I am unopinionated about how I want things done, and I'm trying to get out of your way. And this is rather than trying to please everyone, this says, here's a way to do things.
Yep.
Here's the syntax, period. And here are the assumptions that it makes, and it just works.
It's similar. I mean, it's not that different to a build script. Like MS Build is, built on .NET under the covers. A very primitive language set. You have properties and you have targets, and you can write tasks. And then there's a very defined order in the way things compose. But then you can embed code. Right? You can have a task that you have a script task or a Roslyn code task, or you can compile them ahead of time. And Nick makes a point here about scripting languages in general, which is that they work up until a point. And you could say the same with MS Build. You can get so far until you're like, oh, I can't really do this thing and express it the way I want. So you go and write some custom code, and then you plug that in. And sometimes that works great, and other times you feel like you're fighting it. And I think that's fine. That's just programming. It doesn't feel, it's not good or bad to me. It's just like that's kind of the reality. So I love that these things exist.
There's dynamic data, that kind of stuff too, right? Where you can get so far and then you hit a thing and you're like, oh no, I can't really get farther. Or,
I mean, anything that takes those types of opinions where they try and automate, whether it's 4GL or just anything that's just like what they call low code. Like there's concept of no code and low code application stacks. And well, it's also like a PaaS, right? Like Azure Functions or Lambda or any of those things where it's like, yeah, you can write a .NET function, but you're not necessarily writing an ASP.NET Core app. And the .NET function you're writing sits on top of a set of primitives which are owned by the PaaS platform. And then underneath that, they have got their own code that you don't get to change the fundamentals about how the runtime works. And that is both really good, but also quite frustrating when you hit the limits and you're like, but I know it's .NET, I just want to do this. It's like, well, you can't, because that fundamentally violates the contract that we have with you as a function running on our stack. We can't let you get access to that. And that's, layers of abstraction, encapsulation, all these things. They work up to a really good point, and then sometimes you just need the power and you need to go lower. So I think they always have a place. I love when people do things like this, and we get reminded of why they're useful in certain cases. I never think these are going to take over the world. But they look at things like Power Apps, look at things like VBA for Office, very similar idea, right? Or any of those, or even Excel functions. You want that little bit of power to wire things together. And you remember things like Popfly and all these things where you want to be able to sort of even what was it we're looking at?
Flow, Microsoft Flow has been good for me lately.
And then like those they start out as WYSIWYG drag drop editors, but then you need to do little scripting bits, like whether it's Azure Pipelines or something like Scratch as a coding tool or Logic Apps. Like it's very, very common to have these. I want to start out no code, and then I want the ability to do a little bit of code to do glue and custom bits, but that only gets you so far, generally speaking.
There are somewhere like if that's done in an elegant way, then it feels like you don't ever have to hit this wall of like, oh shoot, I wish I had just written it all by hand. Some do it better than others.
Some do it better, and I think the ones that do it best, in my opinion, are the ones who know the boundaries and set very clear expectations about what you're going to do, and they nail it. And it's just like, it feels like magic, because it's just like they feel like they're 2 steps ahead of you, and when you go to click the thing in their no-code interface, it's like, oh my god, it's actually exactly what I wanted. It's right there, because they optimize for that flow. And that's why some people call that demoware, because sometimes the demo is greatly, and then you go to use it, and you can't do it. And other times, like you said, they get it right for their domain, and you never have to get outside that. Those are really rare, though. Like they feel magical when you come across them, I think.
Yeah. I do, and I haven't done more than read blog posts and look at the animated GIFs and stuff for this one, but for the Sharp script, it does seem pretty thought through as far as like you can embed it into an ASP.NET app or a .NET Core app or something like that. So it seems like that's at least been thought of. Whereas some of these, it's like I don't like it where it's obvious that a PM or a team has said, here's our goals, here's our non-goals. You can't do this. You hit this wall, sorry, we're not supported. I like it when it's really actually been thought through of like, how do we help you get started quickly? And then if you hit the walls, here's how we, let you keep going.
I think those are, just to push back a bit, I think those are slightly different things. I think in this case, Demis is doing what he does a lot, which is he has a vision for how this could be expressed, and he's gone the extra mile to not just show you how to do it. He's supporting these things. That's why it's in his docs. And I think the other thing of where you hit a wall because a product group made a conscious decision not to support it, that's often because there's different expectations about the product that comes out of that group. And if it looks like people get the wrong impression about it and they try and do a thing, they can get turned off. Sometimes it's like, look, I built a cool thing, I'm going to throw it over the wall, and I don't care how you use it. I used it for this thing, but if you want to like rehost it and do that thing or whatever, go for it. And some folks will say that about a lot of the stuff that we build. Like Razor, as a language, was built really optimized around one thing, which was HTML templating in the context of a live HTTP request. But people looked at it and went, oh, that's a cool templating language. I want to write email with it because I author email with HTML. We didn't ship that solution. There was a whole bunch of community solutions that did that. And frankly, they were pretty good, but they were never perfect because we didn't design it that way. We didn't put in the right hooks in certain. You have to work around foibles in the way that we did the hosting model. We didn't really put the effort into making it super hostable. There was enough abstraction that it was possible, and we proved it because we host it. And it was like, yeah, here's the Razor host, go off and have fun. But all the stuff that people thought was part of Razor was actually part of ASP.NET. So when they came to doing those things, they were, well, where's my layout pages? Oh no, that's part of MVC, you don't get that. That's not part of Razor, the language. We just gave you the Razor language bit. And so if we were designing it to be more end-to-end, like this obviously is, you would do those things. But it takes a lot of time and blah, 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 blah. So I think those are slightly different things. But yeah, I totally agree on the sentiment. I think these things will always exist. I love it when people do them well like this. and I'm super interested to see where it goes. Scott, you asked the question.
Yep.
Yeah, don't have any follow-up. Okay.
Nope. I'm learning about it right now.
I had a couple things I wanted to share some updates on. So obviously .NET Core 3 is winding down. I hope folks read the blog posts that went out with Preview 8. I think what was one of the pull quotes was anticlimactic by design. I think that's certainly true of the lower parts of the stack. I still think there's a fair bit of stuff, some notable things happening in the higher levels of the stack. There's a lot of cleanup coming in Preview 9, which I talked about. Like, I really consider Preview 9 to be the release candidate. And that bar is really high now. So every change going into Preview 9 now has to be approved by the .NET engineering director. So it's a pretty big deal. So my email inbox is full of like, here's my change request, here's the reason we're doing it, here's the customer impact, here's the PR so you can see the changes. And then sometimes it's yes, it's approved, sometimes it's a small back and forth about justification. But that's the level that we're at now for all of .NET Core 3. But there, as I said previously, there are parts of the stack that still have known work going on. Blazor, because it's so new, has some stuff that is still going on. Although a lot less than was in Preview 8. But otherwise it is shutting down. And so Preview 9 will be out fairly soon because we all know the release date for 3.0, right? We've already announced it's coming out as part of .NET Conf. And so that's when's that? A month from now?
September 23rd to 25th.
Right, so we're on August 20 right now at the time of recording. So we're a month out from .NET Core 3 GA. I'm saying GA now. I'm noticing that's being said. Scott, I know you don't like GA, but I'm saying GA a lot because I'm seeing it more in the industry. So we don't release to manufacturer anymore. We don't release to the web.
I don't think I'm seeing it more in the industry. The only reason you're seeing it
I'm
more
seeing
in
it because I want to see it.
You want to see it.
Yeah.
Microsoft wants people to see it. It just doesn't make any sense. No one says GA.
What would you say? Final release?
1.0?
It's not 1.0.
Yeah, just released. I don't see why released isn't. I mean, released is utterly unambiguous.
Okay. I don't know. I actually think it's not ambiguous. I think it is ambiguous because we use the term release of like Preview 9 is released, Preview 8 is released. Did you see the new release? The one that we released today, Preview 7. Like I don't quite have that as solid a grounding on release.
GA, like it implies that it's partially available up to a point, and then it's available internally.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, this is from the guy who wants shushing to be a thing. So I don't know. Like
shushing is a thing. I shush into machines all the time.
Yeah. So I did want to say yet again, we are so happy, like genuinely excited. I don't want to do that Microsoft thing. Like I'm totally excited. I'm really excited to be here.
Super excited.
Super excited to talk to you. No. The number of people who have used 3.0 during the previews, oh my goodness. Like so many folks have used 3.0 in the previews, like way more than we've had previews in the past. And I'm not sure if that's a testament to how much longer this release was. And we had a lot more previews coming up to 9, or whether it's because there's so many great features. I don't know what it is, or just the maturity of .NET Core itself. Like, we're 3, 4, 5 years in, it's the 3rd release. Now is the time that people are really whatever it is. Thank you.
What it is it's 3. We should have called the first one 3.
Yeah. I think that would have disappointed a lot of folks.
If
I think back to what the first one was like, I don't think it really deserved a 3.
The next version of Windows 10 will be called Windows 3.
Windows 3. Windows 10
more people
version
will
3?
use.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's coming. There's a couple of things I wanted to point out. I want to show. So let me show my screen and see if it's going to work. Boop, boop, boop. Hit that button.
Nice sound effects. I still want to know who's moving.
And it failed. Look at that. We did all that work beforehand, John, to get it working.
Sir.
And then it's gone ahead and failed on me when I actually wanted
Hello,
to
darkness, mild.
I'm going to plug it in again. Yeah, let's see if I can force it. Apparently, I can go in here. I can click on
That was
this.
very anticlimactic.
I know. Not by design this time. I can do this. I can hit that one. Then I can hit that one. And nothing happens at all. Oh, well. Never mind. That was going to be something I was showing, but we've had some technical. I was going to show the template simplification. So we did a bunch of stuff in Preview 8 in VS to how the templates show in the new project dialog. So Blazor is there as first class, Worker is there as first class, and gRPC app is there as a first class thing. So you can just type, you can just like search for them in the thing now, and they come up, which is kind of nice. We also simplified the web application template itself. So we used to have a lot of features being used in the web application template. That we had all the environment tags to do stuff in production using CDNs and not locally. We've simplified all that. You can still do all that. All the documentation is there on how to do it. But we took it out of the apps, the basic template by default, just to simplify them. It's less to update. It's less for you to grok when you want to do it. Some folks don't want to use CDNs, etc., etc. We also removed the privacy policy, the privacy middleware stuff. Again, it's all docked. You can obviously still do that. It has a privacy page, which is fine, but all the tracking support using cookies for consent and all that type of thing is not in the template by default. Or at all anymore. You can go and add that again, obviously, just by following the article on our documentation page. But there was a lot of moving parts to make that work, and we had a lot of feedback that plenty of folks would just create apps all the time as part of their normal day-to-day and then throw them away. And the privacy policy banner on the top was annoying. So deleting that code was always annoying.
Remember back in the day when we did identity and there was like account and account controller, and then that got all moved into a Razor place or another separate assembly?
Yes, Identity UI we did.
Identity UI, pardon me, yes. Is this kind of like that, where it's like, here's Hello World, and then here's 80 other things that you need for some boilerplate stuff? Can you make the cookie consent UI like a separate Razor component or Razor library?
Yeah, like scaffold and...
No. Yeah. A little bit. So the problem with the cookie consent UI is that it's almost... you want it to be custom. Like it's almost impossible to build one that is generic that's going to work for every site because it's there because of legal reasons. And so we actually consciously went out of our way not to make it pre-canned in the template because of that concern. We wanted you to look at it and go, oh, I have to customize this. The wording by default was such that you couldn't deploy it the way it was on purpose. The privacy policy page literally says, this is where you will put your privacy policy because we're not going to give you a default one, right? You have to do that. Because it's very important that you think about and understand and craft the message with regards to privacy policy. Identity, I would argue, is different. Identity is like, there's a default identity experience out of the box that lets you create users, sign up, reset passwords, do all the best practice things that if you get them wrong can lead to really bad security issues, and you kind of want us to do it right by default. And then we give you the way to customize them, which is it comes as a default thing and then you can override those. So that I would claim that that's the distinction between those two things.
So a question here, somebody asked on the chat, Frederick, and it's something I've been watching over time is Libman, like when Libman will get in the templates, if ever, because I really like Libman.
Yeah, it was looked at. I personally don't feel it's ready to put in the templates, and I expressed that opinion, and then the work hasn't been done to bring it up to what I want it to be to make it ready to put in the templates. Putting something in the template is not just the idea of, does it work well enough for one case, or can I use it in my app day to day? Templates have to be maintained. They're a cost for the team. And every single thing you add to the template adds another reason for the template to get updated when it changes. So templates are often the aggregate of the cost of every change the cadence of change for every single thing that's in the product often comes together in templates, which makes them very brittle, fragile, and expensive. And so but templates are obviously super important product-wise because they're often they're how you get started, and they're often how a lot of folks learn about stuff for the first time. And so we have this, we think about them a lot, and we've always been trying to find that balance between what's the right amount of stuff to put in the template without introducing too many opinions that you annoy too many people who are like, why they got this in the template? I never do it this way. I always delete that. Versus trying to educate folks versus giving people a good starting position to then build real, quote unquote, real apps on top of, and just the cost of keeping them up to date. And so, yeah. So we simplified them. We went through a round of simplification in 3.0 for the web templates in particular because we have the most complicated templates of any of the things. And we'll continue to do that. Like the SPA templates are obviously quite complicated, and they're probably the most brittle because they depend on external things that change quite regularly. And we're looking at ways that we can sort of reduce the burden of maintaining those templates in the .NET Core SDK and in Visual Studio itself, while also empowering the community to have a lot more involvement and say and ownership over what's in those templates because it's an area where there's a lot of opinions, because the SPA ecosystem, there's a lot of very like staunch supporters of a particular framework, even if it's not the most popular by a long way. If it's a distant 4th, 5th, or 6th in terms of usage, they're like, yeah, but I use it, and I really, really, me and my 10,000 friends who use this framework really, really want this to be a template. And we're like, we understand that, but we serve millions of users, and we can't afford to maintain 7 templates or even 5 templates.
Yes, but me though.
Yes, but me, because it's always the most important thing in the world to you. And so we understand that, and we're trying slowly to make changes to the way the product is architected and built so that we can facilitate that. It's not as simple as, oh, but just do this. Like, it's actually complicated. We have to think about how they get into VS for Mac, how they get into VS, how you use them from the CLI, how we update them, how you ship them, what the experience is of acquiring them. If you acquire them on the CLI, do they show up in VS? We want to make all that like effectively as seamless as possible, so that we can then facilitate that type of move where more templates can be community owned, and they're much easier to discover, and it's not why are you not putting framework XYZ in Visual Studio? It's also, we took EF out of the shared framework in 3.0 for various reasons, and that's why the .NET EF tool is not there anymore. We want to do work, and we've had feedback in the past that we shouldn't push EF so hard, which is fair from a certain point of view. We know a lot of our customers use and love Dapper, for example. We love whatever you use. If it's .NET, I'm happy, right? And so we'd love to be able to facilitate more ecosystem sort of support and community support around that. To your point before, Scott, what can we do other than just promoting it? We can do stuff. We can architect the product in such a way that certain things that should be are perceived to be on a more even playing field, I guess, and the perception of choice is there. So EF not being in the framework is one of those things. You have to add it as a package now. Where we've fallen down still is the identity stuff that we ship. Still, we only ship with one provider by default, and that's the EF provider. It is the one that we would ship first, obviously. But there is no other provider. People can write providers. It's obviously factored that way, but I don't know of any that anyone has written. They've only written the EF providers. And so that's something we're looking at in .NET 5 is what can we do to either help seed writing of another provider, or maybe build the first one, or encourage the community to do that and make changes in identity if there's problems with that make that hard. So that was one thing. That started off with template simplification. I want to give it. Go on. Go.
Can I ask one question on the whole template thing? So there's always been this kind of tension of, or I don't know what you call it, where file new project, we give templates, we have all this stuff wired up for you. Or if you don't do it at template time, we say, go read the docs, follow a bunch of steps, and do it manually, right? Add a NuGet package and make this change to your view and import this thing and stuff. The one case where I feel like this is beautiful now is this whole scaffold identity.
And I'd love to do a lot more of that. We have a goal to enable a lot more of these code scaffolding experiences, because we actually think they're vastly more valuable than just template experiences, which are super static by nature. The issue is they're really expensive to build and to keep up to date. So they have the same problem as templates in that they're brittle. So anytime the underlying API changes and we introduce new idioms and new best practices, you have to go and update the scaffolds. And then building the UI and the ecosystem around that is a lot of work. Now, it's not that we don't want to do it, because I actually do want to do it. I think it'll be super empowering. It just hasn't made its way to the top of the priority queue, when it's like, well, we could build Blazor, or we could build an amazing new scaffolding system that works from the command line, VS for Mac, VS, et cetera, right? Because they are somewhat equivalent. If we were going to build the type of scaffolding, if we were going to expand the scaffolding that we tried to do for identity, which, let me be really clear, is actually not very good. It's the start of something good. The underlying stuff is good, but the experience of getting it and using it in VS is not particularly great. It has a lot of bumps along the way that if you don't know how to work around them, you hit a wall. And we do this in the workshop, John, so you'll know that we call them out in the workshops. Like, oh, make sure you hit this box. Make sure you delete what it put in here by default and type this instead. Because if you don't, it's going to do the wrong thing. We still haven't fixed those issues. We need to fix those issues, and then we need to build a really great ecosystem for people to write their own scaffolders that then show up with automatic UI. Because you can't expect every person who wants to write a scaffold to go and build WPF UI to show in VS, and then Cocoa UI to show in VS Code, and then a command line UI to show. That's obviously not going to work. You need to build an ecosystem so that you can just write a scaffolder with a DSL, and then we project a default UI for you in all the places it'll show up, and then maybe have the ability to customize that UI. And these are things we've talked about for years and years and years. They're a lot of work. And now other teams have started doing things. Like there's the Windows Template Studio, which a lot of people I think is really cool. And we've looked at that. I know the Windows 10 team, app team did a bunch of stuff. Xamarin has a bunch of stuff. So there are opportunities. But we all prioritize different things at different times based on where we are in the product lifecycle. And obviously Dotnet Core has been prioritizing a lot on cross-platform work, building up our microservices and services story, doing a lot of our cloud native efforts, making sure we've got the right pluggability at the API level. Blazor obviously is a huge deal with like 4 or 5 people on the ASP.NET team and the folks from the Mono team. To do the scaffolding thing, which I really, really want to do, and we've got some great prototypes of how to make it better, is going to be a multi-person, like many-person effort to do it to the level that we want it to do it to. I think we will do it. I just can't promise when. So cool. I agree with you. Yeah, but that's a bit of background.
Because that does seem like that thing where it's like that enables lowering the on-ramp to saying like, hey, try out this thing, or add GraphQL, or add this other identity provider. It's just like, yep, throw it in and we'll wire it up for you.
Totally agree. And we have, there are other products in the industry that aren't .NET that do this really well. And so, people often say, well, where's your equivalent to XYZ? Spring Boot comes to mind. And again, going back to what we were talking about service stack, a lot of the time it works better when you have stronger opinions and you have a different, more static way of configuring things to work together. .NET Core and ASP.NET Core took a very code-centric approach, which resonated with a lot of folks. It makes it intrinsically harder to tool. Code is dynamic by nature, and it's very hard to introspect over and know for certain what's going to happen before you've actually run it. And so it makes it more difficult to tool. So we're doing a lot of thinking about that. It's longer term thinking rather than next release thinking. Cool. Okay. Some Tech and Power updates from last week, because we had Seb on. We got to talk about Tech and Power. There was a couple of things he said that were upcoming. I can't share my screen, so maybe you can share your screen, John, and I can tell you what to go to.
Certainly. Here, just a sec. Bring up browser. Tech. I'm guessing Tech and Power.
So what I want you to do is go to the continual.
Yes. Okay.
Open up the continuous run, the tfb-status.techandpower.com.
Yeah. Did they link to that somewhere?
I think we did last week. Oh, I don't know if they linked to it on there. tfb-status.techandpower.com. So we submitted updates to our tests to run on .NET Core 3. So ASP.NET Core 3 is in here now. It's pointing at the 3.0 .NET Core, ASP.NET Core container image using a floating end. So basically, as we release new images now, it'll float over to the next 3.0 version. So it'll be on 3.0 Preview 8 now. When Preview 9 comes out and the container gets updated, the next run will be on Preview 9 all the way through 3.0 servicing, right? And so I think I'm trying to figure out which one of these runs has. So we're looking for a completed run. And so if I scroll down...
So the latest completed run, I see number 2 here. Is that...
That's probably the right one. So if we look at that one...
Completed on the 13th.
If I go to plain text, it should have... it looks about the same. Maybe it's not that one. Maybe we're still waiting for it to complete.
This one, yeah,
this
is
34 hours remaining. So you can look at the details. You can't visualize it until it's finished because it's one huge JSON file. But you can go into details and you can look at results.json. And if you're really keen, you can find the results by spelunking through their JSON schema. But you can't visualize them yet. We could also just look at the commit hash there and go to the Tech and Power repo and look at which...
this one right here?
Yeah, the second one. You could look at and look at what commit it ties to. And so the point is that's now in there. We did get results. They're pretty much in line with what we expected. There's a small improvement in the high, small improvement in areas we thought, bigger improvements in others. So it's looking on track, which is good. The other thing that we did, if you go to our aka.ms/ASP.NET/benchmarks, we got a question last week regarding do we run and visualize other frameworks in our mirror of the Tech and Power hardware so that we can continuously compare? And the answer is now yes. So we were doing it, we weren't visualizing them. If you go down to the page selector at the bottom and go to custom, so the page down there, just click in the middle of it.
I'm trying.
Super
there
intuitive.
it is.
Oh no! So you clicked the wrong one. That's a really slow
dear.
page. Go to custom.
Whatever you did
Custom.
it wrong
Go to
because there's a
custom.
lot of spinny things.
I'm trying to. I clicked on micro benchmarks. Okay. You have to be very like.
You have to be deliberate.
What are you doing, man?
All right. So on the right-hand side, if you scroll down the list of different scenarios, you'll notice that plain text non-pipeline is selected by default. You'll notice above that, the plain text now includes frameworks like Actix, which is the written in Rust. And so if you click plain text Actix and then control click fast HTTP, Node.js, plain text, and plain text platform, which means that we're comparing the Tech Empower plain text scenario submission for Node.js, Go's fast HTTP server, Actix, and then ASP.NET Core plain text with middleware and ASP.NET Core plain text platform, and then scroll back up so you can see the actual requests per second. Yep, so there they are up in the top left. Now, you've also currently showing results for both Linux and Windows, so go up to the top right and hit Linux, click Linux, and that will hide the Windows results. So that just gets rid of a bit of noise, okay? And so yours looks different to mine, which is odd. For some reason. I don't know why yours looks different.
Did I not click all the right?
I'm wondering now.
I did plain text platform, plain text Node.js.
Plain text, the one above it as well. Control click. No, don't unclick
right
anything.
Below Orchard blog.
Yep. There we go. Control click on that. There we go. Now scroll back up. All right. And so, waiting for it to reload.
Now, did you still want me to click plain text platform?
Yeah,
below?
control click.
Got it.
So it should be 5. Right. There we go. Now we're looking good.
If I click on this, will it blow up or something?
Blow up? What do you mean?
Expand. Zoom in.
Oh, you can click see it in the top right-hand corner of that quadrant. No. See that? That will blow up that graph. Okay.
Nice.
I never looked at it this way. So that jump was when we went to the 40 gig network that we talked about. But the point here now is the short lines, the ones that have the least horizontal axis space, are the 3 new visualizations for the other competitive frameworks, right? So Node.js is the one right at the bottom, I believe. The one that's above that, I think if you hover over it and get it to get the right point, it is, because the color coding here is, they're all a little bit too similar. They're far too dark.
This one shows Node.js.
So that's that's Actix. Here. We have a problem with Actix right now. It looks like it's only running on one core or something. We have to fix that. So sorry, that's Node.js is the one under. Yep, that one. The one above that is ASP.NET Core middleware. Then the one at the very top is ASP.NET Core platform, which is basically Kestrel Direct, and then the one under that is the Go fast HTTP.
Yeah.
This reminds me of this wonderful ad for color inkjet printers from 20 or 30 years ago, where this person is doing an advertising agency, like he's standing up in front of a crowd with a big piece of paper, and he's got it, and he says the gray light hashed area here is sales in the west, and then the black kind of grayish darker gray. Yeah. So I feel like that about your charts here.
That's awesome.
Like I feel like the earthy tone kind of dirt color is plain text, but the more sepia toned mud clay colored.
So I think in our defense, I think these are all auto-selected by the Power BI graph component we're using. I swear, every day it changes depending on what you click.
Well,
sometimes you get yellow, sometimes you get green. People. Yeah, so I think it depends on how many you select. It tries to figure out a differential. I don't know.
It is literally picked the absolute wrong color.
Yes, I totally agree. As I mentioned, in this case, they all look like the same hue. Even to me, I'm not particularly colorblind, and I'm looking at this and I'm going, these are hard to figure out.
This isn't about color blindness.
No, not in this. No, not in this case. So 3.1, I wanted to quickly talk about. So .NET Core 3.1. John, you can probably stop sharing your screen. We announced that .NET Core 3.1 will be LTS. It'll be towards the end of this year. We are thinking of it as basically a servicing release. We're not expecting to land any sort of big new features in 3.1 because the window is very small. It's really a cleanup release to make sure we get appropriate feedback from customers on 3.0 and then make any long-term changes, supporting changes that we need to in 3.1. There will be some API changes. Because it's a 0.1 release, we'll be able to add things that we find are missing. We're also hoping to do an overhaul of the Windows installer. And so we talked about how the installation of .NET Core via Visual Studio has been overhauled in 16.3, and you now don't get 1,000 add remove program entries for .NET Core SDKs that you get via Visual Studio, which is improvement, I think. We're still working through a couple of sort of bumps on that to try and make that better. But the big thing we're trying to land is to unify all the Windows installers. Today, like, you can go to the download page for .NET Core, and if you go to the advanced downloads page, there's like 18 different installers for Windows, because there's the .NET Core runtime, the ASP.NET Core runtime, the ASP.NET Core hosting bundle. The same again for different businesses. Now we have a Windows desktop application runtime, and then we have the multiple SDKs. We just like there to be a .NET Core installer. So you download the .NET Core installer, you run it, and you say, yeah, I'm running ASP.NET Core apps on my server. And you click that, and it puts everything on that you need to, while still allowing you to, to also bring in other runtimes if you want to. It'll also make it easy to uninstall things that you have already. Like if you say, well, I've got Preview 6 and I want to put Preview 7 on, but I want to keep Preview 6 because I know I have apps that are on Preview 6 that I'm not ready to move yet. And you made a breaking change in Preview 7, as we do in previews. And I don't want the default behavior, which is uninstalling the previous previews. We want that to be an option. Today, we don't have those types of options in our installer because our installers are very rudimentary. And so we're doing that. We're doing all the foundation work for that right now, and we hope to land that in 3.1, which should make the job of managing your .NET Core installs on Windows a lot easier. And then we hope to roll over or carry forward that learning into the Mac installer. For dev, because we only support Macs for dev purposes, obviously, and so we don't have quite as many complex requirements there. So we're going to do it for Windows first, where we have a lot more complex requirements and capabilities, and then we'll do some stuff in the Mac installer too. Folks on Linux, you just use package managers, so you don't have any of these problems. Like the package manager semantics are what you use, and that's what you get.
And I was talking to Kathleen Dollard a couple days ago, and I'm going to update my blog post on cleaning up the previous versions, because it is not currently the most accurate blog post.
Because of how we changed with VS and the way we could count what installs are there, you can get into a situation. I mean, to be fair, it's not that bad. The way to fix it is super easy. You just repair Visual Studio, but it's not intuitive. That's the problem.
It's not intuitive because you think you want to delete them all except the latest, but you really want to delete them all except the latest and the 2 or 3 that you might need for Visual Studio to actually run and continue running.
Well, to be fair, to get the cleanest state, you want to delete them all, delete the folder, and then go and repair Visual Studio.
And then Visual Studio figures out which one it needs.
That's right. They won't appear back in add remove programs if you do that, because Visual Studio then owns them. Okay. But if you need to install others for use outside of Visual Studio managing it, then you can install the standalone SDK. Again, we're doing some tweaks with the VS installer stuff to make that a little clearer, so that hopefully you'll still see them in the add remove programs, even when they were owned by VS, but it'll guide you to do the right thing.
Okay.
The other thing I want to briefly mention is I'm going to NDC Sydney in October. So I'll be teaching the workshop there with the ASP.NET Core app building workshop, updated for 3.0, RTM, GA, release, whatever we want to call it. And I'll have Scott Hunter with me, Director of .NET Program Management, and I'll have Kevin Pilch, Engineering Manager for ASP.NET Core and EF, who will be helping me teach the workshop. It'll be the first time that either of them have taught the workshop, so that'll be fun.
Cool.
And then I'll be doing a talk and flying home again. We have other stuff, like we're coming into a conference season, right?
Well, I think we're coming into the conference season, but another way to think about it is because we are marching up to .NET Core 3, there is a lot of work being done to tighten up workshops. We're going to go and redo a bunch of videos. A lot of the MVAs, the Microsoft Virtual Academies, we're going to kind of redo in a new style. So we're going to have little kind of bite size. We're going to do a new C# tutorial, new .NET 101 tutorial. We got a new sample app for ASP.NET coming out soon that is going to be super, super nice that Brady Gaster has been putting a great deal of work on. We're going to have all new Xamarin 101 videos. Somewhere around the end of September, there is going to be a flood of very nice, clean, new content that we are very proud of. And then we're also currently, Shane Boyer and a lot of folks are putting a lot of work into getting the .NET samples that exist on GitHub available in the new docs sample browser. There's like a readme.txt and some metadata, and then we'll go and ingest those. So if one were looking for some sample code, they could find it in the single place. Additionally, a lot of work is being done. And I'm not sure if I told you some of these things. We should have more meetings together. because real work happens.
We do have a standing meeting because I think I made this exact point in an email thread that I had no idea what was going on. We're like, let's have a new meeting.
Yeah. You got to come to the meeting.
I did come to the meeting.
Maybe it was me that didn't come. We are putting work into lighting up every single one of the docs samples that can be lit up so that it runs in the browser. So if you bump into a system.datetime docs, you should be able to run that code in the browser. So we're going through thousands and thousands of samples trying to light those up with try.net, which is running .NET in WebAssembly in docs.
Okay.
So huge amount of coordinated work happening right now.
Cool. I was just answering a question in the chat. I had nothing. I'm happy to answer some questions. So we should answer some questions. I mean, it's 11:05, so we didn't allow much time for questions, but
yeah.
There was a question on UTF-8 string.
Oh, yeah. I know nothing about it except that it's there. It's a thing. What was the question?
I don't know. When it's happening.
Okay, that's great.
We're all falling apart.
Dear. Christian's asking why no homebrew, and I'll just answer instead of typing it here. So, I think really in the really early days in DNX, I think there was a homebrew. We at the time, it turned out there weren't enough homebrew users that it felt like it was critical mass that should be where we concentrate our efforts with regards to the installer tech. It's a little bit like, why isn't there not a chocolatey installer that we maintain? Anyone could maintain the homebrew installer for .NET Core and do a great job, and I'd invite them to do that. I would say that the vast majority of Mac users who are using .NET Core use VS for Mac, and they get .NET Core through that channel, and will then typically just use the official .NET Core installer for Mac to get out-of-band installs. So that's kind of where we focused our effort. If people think that that's wrong, or that they have evidence that we should be putting effort into homebrew, I'd love to send it through. Send it to Kathleen, send it to Syed, who works for .NET Core on VS Mac. So it was a lot more in tune with that developer story, and let us know what your thoughts are.
Speaking of VS, just since you mentioned VS Mac, there is an update for one of our workshops that includes VS for Mac. So it's the ASP.NET Core for Beginners workshop, which is kind of like a half-day sort of thing where you go through and build a movie tracker, I think. And so that now has Visual Studio Code, and Visual Studio for Mac, including all the screenshots and everything. Okay. So, yeah, so any Mac users, check that out. Love to have feedback on how that works for you.
Cool. I'm just scrolling back through to make sure there is any quick takes I can give folks. Someone, Bad Redding. I don't know how to say that name. Sorry. Bad Redding, maybe. Yep. Request: please support GraphQL on Boxy. What is Boxy? I'll show my ignorance.
I don't know.
Okay.
So there's. Yeah.
There is great. So GraphQL has been looked at a couple times by the team, the ASP.NET Core team specifically.
Boxy, BOXY.
Yeah. I
don't know.
Our current take on, I can just speak to GraphQL and ASP.NET Core. Our current take is that the community has done a fine job in putting together GraphQL support for ASP.NET Core, and there is a number of folks who are using that and seem to be using it successfully. We haven't, again, felt that there's critical mass of a bunch of folks asking and demanding that the ASP.NET Core team themselves build GraphQL support. So it also, it feels like something that if we were going to do, there are opportunities there to make a really cool story, definitely, like with deeper integration into the data layer and things like that. But again, the team has had other priorities. I don't think it's something that is uniquely one of those things that really only the team could do well. I think anyone who was wanted to do a good job on that could learn and come up with a really good set of sort of developer experiences for building GraphQL with EF Core and ASP.NET Core, or GraphQL with Dapper or whatever it might be, right? Like I don't think there's anything particularly insightful that we would bring other than the typical performance and security and that type of stuff. So again, if people disagree with me, let me know. But that's been our current feeling. We have not had thousands and thousands of people asking for it, unlike a lot of other things. Someone says your new lighting makes you look 20 years younger, Scott. So that's good.
I am 20 years younger.
And then they ask, what's happening with bringing back the dramatic zoom out? We haven't got any further with that at all. Frederick asks, I was sad to see, and I haven't read the whole question, so I'm doing this the wrong way. I could be leading myself into a trap. I was sad to see that previews of 3.0 did not end up in the Microsoft Aptitude feed. Is the overhead of pushing previews to apt, too big for you to do it?
Well, it's not appropriate to put beta stuff in apt, is it?
That's a good question.
That would be a
pretty
question
sure that we
Linux
do
build.
have previews available in a feed.
Oh, the Microsoft app. They said
right.
the Microsoft Aptitude feed. So yeah, that would be appropriate.
Would it? I'm just going to go look at the download page, and I just want to see what the Linux install instructions say.
That is a very good question.
That's interesting. I mean, yeah, you're right. I'm assuming this is just what we've done, and I imagine it's because of you don't really get side by side support with apt feeds, right? Because you'd have to have a different package name ID to get a side by side install, because it would just be a new version of an existing one and it would uninstall the old one. So we only make Linux binaries.
It would work for the .NET Core 3 style of things.
Yeah,
Would it
maybe.
not?
I see what you're saying. Yeah. If you only wanted the latest
If there was a
SDK.
beta train, it would be like an auto. Yeah.
Yes. It'd be a different ID. That's right. I feel like this has been talked about before on the team, and it was at the time decided it was not, again, being asked for enough.
Never revisit it though.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at the different. Yeah, so what I noticed is that if you go to the download page for the released versions, Linux has package management instructions, but it doesn't have it for the preview download page. So yeah, that does seem like it's something that we've just never done. We've never put them in the package managers, the previews that is. But I encourage you to start a thread on GitHub in the appropriate repo to chat to the release folks about that. Let's have a look. Is there anything else? Someone's asking a question about the .NET Foundation. John?
Sorry, what's the question?
Does the .NET Foundation force its supported projects to be using only supported versions of .NET Core? I don't think so.
Not at all. So that's a common misunderstanding. .NET Foundation doesn't run projects, force them to do things. We have projects that do all kinds of stuff. So, I mean, there's some kind of best practices from an open source governance perspective, but as far as how projects, the technical decisions, that's kind of up to them. So there's some stuff in the works as far as kind of package, locking down how package security and things like that, but that's kind of early on. So as far as actual, like, what version of .NET you support or don't, do you?
Okay. Frederick points out that the 2.2 previews were in apt. Core Insider is in apt. Code Insider is in apt. And previews of 2.2 were in apt, but 3.0 aren't. Okay, well, I don't know. I'd have to go and talk to the release team, the .NET Core release team, about that. I can certainly reach out to them and ask that question. Thanks for the question. AL3892 asks, how is Windows Perf looking? We usually talk about Linux Perf. Yeah, we talked about this last week in the Perf update. Windows Perf is actually, for raw RPS, Windows is generally better currently. There are quite some differences between the .NET Core stack on Windows and Linux. The biggest thing, we've had .NET on Windows for 20 years, and so there's a lot of stuff there. There's a symbiotic nature with a whole bunch of stuff of how the runtime worked, .NET Framework in particular. Hi, Scott, on Windows. And we've only been on Linux for a few years, and so there's some areas where we still need to do some improvement. Oddly, there are some things that are better on Linux. For example, startup time for our processors is better on Linux than it is on Windows. And our dashboard shows that. And I don't know why. We haven't done that investigation yet. It's something we want to look at in .NET 5. But the RPS is generally better on Windows. In the Tech and Power scenarios, for like plain text, there's a difference in our environment of like 4.8 million on Windows for plain text middleware versus 4.3 million. So it's 10%, maybe a bit more. And that's like plain text, so that's like the lowest thing you can do. For the higher end scenarios, the difference isn't quite as pronounced, but it's still there, But again, we're talking about benchmark scenarios. In real world scenarios and applications, I doubt you would see too much difference, but I'd love to hear anecdotes from folks or evidence from folks that have seen otherwise. And I'll just reiterate that it's an area that we continue to invest deeply in, and we will be looking at again with a magnifying glass in .NET 5, which is closing the gap with regards to Linux performance. And so we talked about Tom's transport before that he submitted that is a native transport for Linux, that it vastly improves certain scenarios for ASP.NET Core performance, again in the benchmarks. And we want to take what learnings we can from that and see if we can just roll that straight into the default transport as well. So yeah, there is a difference. It's measurable. It is there. You can see it in the benchmarks. It's not earth-shattering, but it is there, and we continue to plug away at it to get rid of it. So someone asks on Twitch, Code Stencil. So from what you said earlier, is it correct to say much will not be happening from the EF side soon? Well, EF Core in 3.0, the big investment there was in the rewrite of the query engine, really as a future-proofing mechanism. There was a fair bit of debt and design sort of angst with the way the query engine was implemented in EF Core, and they took this opportunity to really do that again in order to set them up better for the future. They've also, the Cosmos DB provider will be available in 3.0, which is something I know a lot of folks have been looking forward to, so you can use EF Core against Cosmos DB. So that's there. And there were a bunch of smaller improvements as well in EF Core. So by no means nothing. There's a lot of stuff happening under the covers to set it up for the future. But perhaps that one big feature that you've been looking for is not there yet in EF Core 3 versus EF Core 2. Of course, the other thing they did was they made EF 6.3 work on .NET Core, because it is a different framework. They're fundamentally based on different principles, and there are features in EF that will never come to EF Core, and as a result, they invested in supporting EF on .NET Core by way of making EF 6.3 work on .NET Core. But they are fundamentally different frameworks in some aspects, and so that's why both still exist, but EF Core is where the future investment is. Probably take one or two more. Maybe you've talked about it, but I'd love to know more about the Bedrock changes in 3.0. Was there a connection abstraction for clients as well? Yeah, so the Orleans team tweeted this morning that their latest release is showing lots of great performance improvements because this is the release that's been replatted on top of the Bedrock APIs that are part of ASP.NET Core. And so that's been a long-going effort as a result of the Kestrel work and to try and slowly sort of introduce new connection abstractions and implementations so that it's easier to do network programming in .NET on top of this new stack. And it's based on everything we've learned in building Kestrel for ASP.NET Core. And so is there an abstraction for clients? Yes, we share a bunch of those types with the Signaler client, actually. I'm not sure if it's as fully fleshed out in the client side as it is on the server side yet. It might be. I honestly don't know. The Bedrock stuff kind of flies under the radar. It's not really, we don't really talk about it as a, yeah, go and build this new thing, because a lot of it is very foundational and is very enabling rather than, here's a great new set of features we want people to go and use. But we know, we're doing it in conjunction with other teams like the Orleans team, obviously ourselves for Kestrel, and the Signaler, Azure Signaler service runs on it as well, and obviously our own Signaler. And so we've been working on that. Someone asked, does Bedrock replace libuv? No, so that's a different layer of abstraction. Libuv, we have a libuv transport that's built on the Bedrock APIs, right? So that's the layering. Like Bedrock is this contract of, I have a bunch of bytes coming in over some pipe, and then I want a bunch of buffers to be managed for me so that I can read bytes off this pipe, or series of pipes, because I might have lots and lots of clients, right? And then I want to be able to read from those and write to those and have the management of those pipes and the underlying transports taken care for me by whatever transport implementation I've opted to use. And libuv has a transport implementation. We have an implementation for the .NET Sockets API, and you can write your own implementations as well. And so that's what Bedrock is really about. The API used to talk to on either end of a pipe, where in a server or a client scenario. Client talks to one server has lots of clients, and you need to manage that, and that's what Bedrock is about. Building new primitives to make that easier in .NET. All right, I think that's it.
Sounds good.
So it's nice to see everyone again. We should do this more often. We'll try. I think we're going to try and get us on a little more often, right?
Yeah,
that's good.
Absolutely.
At least once
anytime
a
you're, yeah, sounds good.
And if I don't know what the pipeline for guests looks like, and I know we keep saying there's a site where people can suggest.
Yeah, right when you stop, right when the show ends,
oh,
there's
it'll come up.
A link. And some of the ones we've got planned, we've got identity server folks talking about identity server in the templates. Yeah, we have. I was thinking about, I don't know if we want to do a deeper dive into the systemd thing, but that's possible.
That would require someone to come in and demo Linux. So we'll have to go and find someone.
Who can share a screen on Linux.
That's right.
One other one that I was looking at was if we want to do one with the HTTP REPL. Ooh. And when I talked to the team that built that, they also said, they also work with other web tool stuff. So it's possible we could look at if there's anything else web tools updates related. So
all right,
those are some that are in the list. But if people have recommendations, watch at the very end screen and it'll give you the link.
Awesome. So. All right. Cool. Thanks, everyone. Still no dramatic zoom out, so we'll just
we just have to roll backwards.
Oh, yeah. I'm just going to stare intently into the camera. Bye.